Keith Corey is an attendee, and he's part of the CUAB.
Yeah, I've promoted him to panelist. I think he needs to accept.
And Ed is there as well.
Yeah.
We're also missing a few council members too, I think.
All right, thank you.
Kathy just joined. Okay, buddy, we're recording. We're live.
So are we ready to get started? Or are we still waiting for people? Okay. I called this joint meeting of the Budget Committee and the Citizens Utility Advisory Board meeting to order. We'll start with the introductions. Maybe we could start with the Mayor and Council, and then the Budget Committee members, and then the CUAB members, and then City staff. You want to start, Mark?
Sure. Good morning, or good evening, everyone. It's been one of those days. Mark Gamba, Mayor.
I'm Kathy Heisey. I'm the Council President. She, her pronouns.
Angel Falconer, City Councilor.
Leslie Schachner. I'm a citizen member of the Budget Committee and the Chair.
Did Councilor Nicodemus go?
There's a Nicodemus, City Councilor.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you down there. Any other budget committee members?
John Stahl, citizen member.
Michael Osborne, citizen member.
Kaylee Nance, citizen member of the Budget Committee.
And CUAB members?
I guess I'll go. Corey Hester, part of the CUAB board.
Any other CUAB members? If not, then staff.
I see Ed Simmons down there. I believe Ed is a CUAB member.
Maybe he doesn't know his mic is off.
Okay.
Staff will go next. Hi, I'm Ann Ober. I'm the city manager here in Milwaukie, and I'm going to pass it off to Jennifer Garway.
I'm Jennifer Garway, and I'm an assistant city engineer. I'll be presenting to you today.
And I'm Steve Adams. I'm the city engineer, and I am here listening in to Jen's marvelous report.
Peter Pazzarelli, I'm the Public Works Director for the city, and I'll be presenting tonight as well.
I'm Kelly Brooks. I'm the assistant city manager, and I'm just here to help support Peter and Jen if they need me.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Dennis. I'm the Administrative Services Director.
Good evening, everybody. Keith McClung. I'm the Assistant Finance Director.
So we have everybody in now, right? So the next order of business is the approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any comments or corrections to the November 15th, 2021 Budget Committee minutes?
Move to approve the Budget Committee minutes.
Second.
It's been moved to approve the minutes from the November 15th, 2021 Budget Committee. Any discussion? Nope. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? Motion carries. So at this time, we'll open the meeting to any community members that would like to discuss city business with the committee. Those wishing to speak need to email finance@milwaukieoregon.gov or raise your hand in Zoom. Or you can also write a comment on Zoom chat to indicate you would like to speak. Are there any members of the community here?
Hi, Leslie. I do have Reba Crocker on. She
Okay.
should be on here in just 1 second.
And Chair Schachner, just so you know, Councilor Beatty also just joined the meeting.
Welcome.
In the chat, it looks like Reba just said that she's here to watch. So I think that was all the public comments we have.
So do we need to read these out, or are they just entered into the record? Oh, she's just here to watch. Okay. Moving on. I will now call on our city manager, Ann Ober, for any updates.
Hi, everyone. Mostly we're going to be talking about projects tonight, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. I did just want to give you a couple of highlights. The first is that tomorrow night, the council will be returning to in-person meetings. So for any public who are watching tonight, and then also for future budget meetings, we are planning on doing those meetings, if possible, in person. And right now, the numbers are looking like that's probable as we're going into the budget hearings in May. So we will be setting up a space that should allow everybody a little bit of distance, but also keep people in a good conversation as we're trying to figure out the budgets. Otherwise, I don't want to take anybody's thunder by talking about any projects tonight. Is there anything specific that people would like to ask me about?
What's up with the old city hall?
Perfect. We are in the process of replatting that parcel. So basically what's happening is we're taking the entire city block and we're cutting the city hall building and the area right in front of the building out from the rest of the parcel. The city would be maintaining the rest of the parcel. So we'll keep the parking lot as well as all the green space around it, the sculpture garden and the trees. And then the actual building would be up for an RFQ process to select somebody coming into the building. The goals associated with that project were mostly set by a community group through our Blue Ribbon Committee and then brought to council for their general support. The replat is now sitting at the county to actually have that officially recorded on the deed. And then we will be with council in April to surplus the building. And then we would be actually putting the RFQ out probably in May, June-ish.
Thank you.
Yeah. Same thing on the new city hall. Kelly Brooks is on the call tonight. She's the person who's actually managing and coordinating that project. We're just now getting together the team that's going to help with the redesign of a couple of the pieces within the building. As a reminder to you all and to anyone who may be watching tonight, the project itself, the second floor where the staff are, is pretty much actually done already. The real focus and work is going to be on creating the main front desk. So the experience that the public has when they come into the space in order to get support from the city. And then also our council chambers and then the entrance. So those are the main places where we're going to be working on making improvements before we move into the facility. And we're hoping that will start sometime next year.
Is there a move-in date target?
I have a dream, but I think I'm going to leave it to Kelly.
No, I mean, I'm just aiming to try to get moved in if I can in the fall of 2023. But to be honest, I don't have all of the contracts in place right now to provide you with the definitive schedule. I'm working through those.
Thank you. So I guess we're done with this now. We can move on, right?
I think that's wonderful. Thank you.
The next order of business is a presentation of the franchise fees code update, which will be presented by Keith McClung and our guest Spencer Parsons with Beery, Elsner, and Hammond LLP.
Thank you, Leslie. Over the past couple of months, the city and myself have been discussing franchise fees and Comcast with Spencer at Beery Elsner. He's here tonight to answer questions, provide some details, and just provide some industry information. So, Spencer, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Spencer Parsons, Beery, Elsner, and Hammond. I've been in discussions with Bonnie and Keith about right-of-way issues with the city. And as much as anything else, I think what I'm here for this evening is to answer questions that you folks may have. A couple of things that I was asked to touch on, first and foremost, was the Comcast litigation and potential implications for the city of Milwaukie. So, and you may be aware of this, but kind of the realm of telecom regulation at the local level is broken down by federal law into multiple different buckets. And two of the primary buckets that apply are cable entities and telecom entities. And even though the way things have evolved in the industry is that there's a lot of convergence between the two, the regulatory scheme hasn't caught up to that. And so there's quite a bit of overlap. And so when you look at like the Beaverton case, so Beaverton has a federal lawsuit going. Comcast sued Beaverton because they had not been paying for use of the right-of-way as of the date of Beaverton's adoption of its right-of-way ordinance. And as of the date that the FCC issued an order a couple of years ago, the 621 order, the cable order, that put a cap on what could be charged for use of the right-of-way by cable industries. But it was only progressive in nature. So it didn't look back, and it didn't kind of open the cities up to potential financial liability for past practices. It just said from the date of this order going forward, this is how things shall apply. And so there's been a lot of intrigue regarding that at the local level. In terms of, is there retroactive liability to that? That's the easier of the two issues, and the answer is no. If the 621 order has undone anything that's happened in the past, it's just prospective in nature. But two, there's been a lot of questions about what the implication of the 621 order in particular, and specifically Beaverton's litigation with Comcast, means for what cities are doing. And what I would say is that the implications of the Comcast litigation is limited in scope. First, to any kind of ruling that comes out of the federal court will apply directly to cable right-of-way users and not necessarily telecom right-of-way users. And then secondly, the facts in the Beaverton case are such that the only thing that they're arguing about with Comcast is whether or not they need to, the amount of fees that need to be paid prior to prior to adoption of the right-of-way ordinance, and as a first subset, a second set prior to the passage of the 621 order by the FCC. So outside of that kind of limited context, there's not going to be a broad applicability of the litigation. That lawsuit also, just so you know, there has been a partial settlement between Comcast and the city. So now it's just down to the one question of fees that the city alleges are owed as of the date of the adoption of the right-of-way ordinance. That is a start date to the date of the 621 order. Everything else outside of that has been taken off the table. And so, except to the extent that there's a potential overlap factually between Milwaukie and a cable service provider and the adoption of Milwaukee's right-of-way ordinance and non-payment during that period, there's really going to be somewhat of a limited, there's likely to be limited overlap. So that's the first thing staff asked me to touch on. The second was a question of the city having an issue with wireless telecom providers paying under the city's right-of-way ordinance. And what I can say about that is I don't know the specifics. I don't know which entities those are. I think in some conversations with staff, there's some feeling that Verizon is underpaying the city. And for wireless folks, it's what you'll see a lot of times is that the wireless people who they have a license to operate in the city or a franchise, but they're paying for use of other people's facilities in the right-of-way. And so you encounter an argument that the city, if you require us to pay what the person who owns the facilities in the right-of-way is paying, then in essence, you're getting paid twice for one service. I don't know what the specifics are in Milwaukee's case, but in that case, I think sometimes there's validity to that argument. Oftentimes, it's just an argument that's thrown out to keep the city, or cities plural, not just Milwaukee, sitting on its hands from pursuing that. That's a question that largely gets answered in two ways. One, at a staff level or by an outside consultant hired by the city who's administering the city's right-of-way regulations. And then two, that comes up as part of the regular auditing process. And so cities' right-of-way ordinances and franchises all provide for the right to audit what's been paid to the city and to true up underpayments, and in the case where there's underpayments that reach a certain threshold, to reimburse the city for that cost. Now, a lot of times there's a hesitancy to undertake an audit because of the costs involved. It can run in the tens of thousands of dollars. So cities usually will just do kind of a back of the napkin calculation of whether or not the amount of numbers that they're thinking about justify the cost of an audit. Something you've seen very recently are jurisdictions banding together to kind of realize an economy of scale situation, hire a single auditing organization to undertake an audit for multiple jurisdictions and kind of get the benefit of efficiency that some of the larger jurisdictions get to take advantage of when they do audits. You'll get pushback when you try to do that. I have seen almost every time when a city pursues that avenue, protests by the entities being audited, but I am yet to see anything in a franchise that doesn't allow a city to do that. And I've seen several jurisdictions successfully team up and undertake audits together. The right-of-way code, there was a question about the right-of-way code in 5G and the areas of overlap, and you're probably all aware of this now. I know that you have adopted a 5G resolution, but the right-of-way, 5G is kind of a separate sub-creature of telecom, and what the FCC has done has segregated it from regular wireline facilities and even from macro cellular towers. Small cell is regulated in its own way, subject to the FCC's small cell order, and they've put caps on what can be charged with a safe harbor. There is a way to get around that if the city wants to undertake a comprehensive cost analysis. You have the ability, if you can establish that a reasonable estimation of the city's cost of administering 5G in the right-of-way is greater than the safe harbor numbers that the small cell order provides, you can do that. There's some work up front to be able to do that, but that's separate and aside from use of the right-of-way by a wireline entity. And so you'll hear testimony from folks often that protest about a right-of-way ordinance, and the short and easy answer to that is to point them to your 5G resolution that largely implements the small cell order mandates. And then to the extent that you have public works design standards that are specific to small cell facilities, point them to that as well.
Could I
yeah, please interrupt.
I appreciate all this context, not all of which I understand, but what I would be interested in learning about, it's my understanding from discussions we've had at previous budget meetings that Comcast is refusing to pay a particular right-of-way fee completely. I would like to know how that situation fits into what you're talking about.
Keith, do you know what that fee is? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, back in September, or excuse me, August, I believe, Comcast gave us notice that they weren't going to be paying the 7% right-of-way fee starting October 1st. So that was about $60,000 that they remitted to us, and it was related to the 7% fee that they were collecting from Milwaukie residents, and then subsequently submitting to us as payment for that.
So, okay, so it's probably 5%. Under federal law, telecom's capped at 7%, the maximum amount that the city can collect, and for cable it's 5%. But essentially, the same general concept. When the 621 order came out, it hewed back what the city was allowed to collect in those fees, and what it did essentially is that it said that in-kind contributions provided to the city, so drops to public facilities, any PEG contributions, all of those things get offset against that 5%. So in other words, what used to be a 5% cable franchise fee and then other in-kind contributions that were negotiated as part of a cable franchise that the city would receive, those additional costs didn't count against the 5%. And what I've seen, if it's a similar letter to what I've seen for other clients from Comcast, what they said around that same time is, now we're going to start deducting that amount from the 5%. And so the 5% is not going to be a true 5%. It's going to be a 5% minus those line item deductions. And the 621 order authorizes that. There was a large coalition of local governments that challenged the 621 order at the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals. We were unsuccessful on that point, and that is now, until we can get the legislature in Washington, D.C. to do something about that, that's the lay of the land as pertains to cable. As pertains to Beaverton, relating back to Beaverton, I think it's a little bit, that question's a little bit distinguishable. My understanding of the Beaverton litigation is that question's a little bit distinguishable, because in Beaverton's case, what happened is they adopted an ordinance that imposed a fee, and for a period of time, a year or two, Comcast paid zero to them. They just didn't pay it. And so that's the amount of money that's now in controversy in that federal litigation. It's not related to offsets of in-kind contributions. It's when the effective date of their right-of-way regulations went into place and when Comcast began paying them.
I have another question just for clarity. I read the Eugene case, and it appeared to me in there that they were distinguishing between right-of-way fees for cable and then right-of-way fees for data services. So my question is, the percentage for cable, is that charged on top of the data services right-of-way fee, or are they included in a single one?
So this is from a local perspective, this is a very frustrating thing to say, but essentially the truth is that cable operators get a pass on their non-cable services. Under federal law, under the interpretation of the FCC and the courts, the city's allowed to charge 5% for cable services, but for what you're calling information services, for lay purposes, that's essentially broadband internet. The cities don't get a 5%, are not entitled to 5% of that. And so what you're seeing is an erosion of this. When I said there's kind of been these different buckets, and there was kind of a system that worked out, there was a discrete realm of cable, there was a discrete realm of telecommunications, but broadband internet and the provision of broadband internet by telecommunications providers and cable providers commingling to provide that. The cable industry has, for the time being at least, worked a loophole for itself where its broadband services are not subject to franchise fees by local jurisdictions. And that's, I mean, for many reasons, that's problematic, not least of which is that broadband services are an increasing source of cable providers' revenues, and cable services alone are a decreasing source of revenue for them. So you've got the one area where we are able to get our 5% going down, and at the same time, the area that's carved out from that regulation exploding.
Lisa, your mic's off. So, Keith, are we getting anything paid by Comcast at this point?
You're muted, Keith.
Sorry. Yes, we are. We are collecting the 5%.
Oh, okay. But we're not collecting the amount that we thought we were going
Well,
to
they've
get.
ceased paying on the information services piece. So that was we got paid for July through September. But then they stopped August 1st, or excuse me, October 1st for the information services piece.
So as I understand it, what you're saying, Spencer, is the Beaverton case is not really going to help Milwaukie in any way because the legislation itself doesn't, or the FCC.
My sense is if there's an issue in Milwaukie, factually I don't know, but if there's an issue in Milwaukie where the city imposed the fee and there was some lag between the time when that became effective and Comcast began paying it may be an analogous similar situation. But as far as the 621 order and those in-kind issues, that's not really germane. And during the last year or so, as the appeals courts have rendered decisions on the 621 order, we're seeing that it's going to take legislative action at the federal level to undo these portions of the decision that we, as the public sector side of the litigation, lost on.
Thank you. I'm done. Anybody else?
Mayor Gibb, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah. So do we know whether or not Comcast stopped charging their subscribers that percentage that they were subscribing?
Yes, the 7% they've ceased collecting from customers. So on average, Milwaukie customers should have seen about a $6 to $7 reduction of this fee that they've stopped collecting or charging.
Okay, thanks.
But I will, just to follow up, Mr. Mayor, that's a really good point, because that money, any money that gets collected by a service provider as a pass-through is not their money. It's supposed to either go back to the end consumer or go to the franchise authority. And that's common. That's a common issue that comes up during, right-of-way regulation / administration, and also comes up often during the course of an audit. As you know, it's kind of what I like to say is it's kind of like when you play Monopoly. Once in a while, you get the get out of or bank error in your favor, collect $50. You never get utility error in your favor. I mean, I am yet to see that happen.
I will say I don't think I'm a Comcast internet subscriber, and I don't think I'm not a cable user, but I don't think my bills have gone down at all. They only go one direction. I guess, Mr. Parsons, I would say you've raised more questions for me than you've answered, which is I'm not dinging you for that. It's just that we haven't had a lot of discussion and information about this in a couple of years at least. And so I think it'd be helpful for us, and this is really more for staff, to like kind of have a timeline of when our ordinance went in, when the 621 order happened. Do we need to amend our ordinance because it's not in compliance with the 621 order? The difference, and this whole thing that they can just get 5% because they call themselves a cable provider, even though that's less and less of their business, and that we don't get to choose under which system they are paying fees, is something problematic to me, and I'd be interested in knowing what's going on a national lobbying level with that. But I took down a ton of questions like, where's our timeline versus about our ordinance and this 621 order? What do we need to do to, be in compliance? Yeah. And is there nothing going on at the federal level on either that or the 5G small cell? The small cell thing was pretty hotly contested when the FCC enacted that, and that FCC commission chair is no longer there. I know those seats are not, they're staggered between the two parties, so it's not like it's a wholesale turnover when you have a change of administrations. But is there no sort of potential changes afoot on the whole small cell regulation thing?
So, I mean, there's two areas that at the judicial level, I would say no. I think that's largely run its course. I'd be very surprised if anything else percolated to the surface through the court system that would make any kind of substantive change to what I just described. At the legislative level, there are rumblings. There have been bills that have been introduced, but nothing has gained any momentum. There is a small body of senators and representatives who the public sector has the ear of and has been informing of these issues that are developing and the problems that these things are creating. But, right now, I don't think there's anything necessarily active on the radar specific to the outfall of the 621 order or the small cell order. What I'll say about that is for the 621 order for cable, until something in that context happens, the city's hands are kind of tied. In the realm of small cell regulation, the fees that the small cell order establishes are frankly ridiculous. It's I think for a co-location facility, it's kind of like $270 or something like that. And for a standalone, it's $500, which, the city can hardly, any city anywhere can hardly even take in an application and get the ball rolling on processing it for that kind of money. So it's not very difficult if the city's interested in adopting higher than those minimum safe harbor amounts that are provided in the small cell order. It's possible to undertake an analysis to do that and increase those fees. The small cell order places a cap on that in that it says the city can't charge more than a reasonable estimation of the anticipated cost for that. But the 3 or 4 jurisdictions in Oregon that are clients that I've worked with that have undertaken that process have come up with amounts that range from $1,200 to $2,000, maybe even $2,500 for doing that. So it's a far cry from what the FCC established in its small cell order. So there is some daylight that's in the city of Milwaukee's control if they want to look at doing that. That's going to require legwork at the city level because it's going to require a lot of number crunching and anticipating because you don't have records of past costs for this. This is all new. It's kind of forecasting costs going forward, at least for the first few years. But what you do have is sister jurisdictions that have done some of that work that you can look at for guidance.
But so you started off talking about legislation, but I guess what I was trying to get at is the FCC itself. changing it.
It's still relatively young. Although, I mean, I know that, we're 2 years into a new administration now, but we still have an FCC appointment pending that hasn't been approved yet. So the new FCC hasn't even really gotten into high gear yet. So nothing really at the administrative level either.
Okay.
Hi, Councilor Heisey. You got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just curious if you could share any information about interest that we've seen in 5G. Have we received applications for 5G use or any activity in that realm?
We've received one from Astound Broadband.
One application for how many installations?
I believe it was just the one.
Just one.
So, yeah, it's pretty recent.
Okay. So that's the first we've had in a couple of years. Thanks.
So, and just to give that a little context, I don't know what Milwaukee's experience was, but other jurisdictions, when they looked at implementing some small cell regulations and fees, industry showed up en masse and said, if you do anything more than the bare minimum, we're just going to take our work somewhere else and we're going to pass over you. You're going to become, essentially cellular flyover country. And I would just, if you heard that as the sitting policymakers, I would advise to take that information with a grain of salt, and especially a jurisdiction like Milwaukie that sits right on a heavy traffic corridor. If you think about how these service providers compete with one another, they provide service maps and covered maps with each other. And so if somebody says, give us a free handout to locate in your jurisdiction, or we're going to pass by you, they may do that at first, but with some patience, they're going to want to fill in places where they skipped, going after the low-hanging fruit. And I have advised clients not to take that into the calculus right now because they need it more than we do. And as local government policymakers, it doesn't make sense to give these corporations these kind of regulatory handouts just for them to turn around and make money hand over fist and not pass that back to city residents.
Just one more question for staff for a future answer. I don't expect an answer tonight, but he made reference to Public Works design standards for the 5G. And I remember talking about that some when we were writing letters, opposing the 5G order. But if we have those, I don't think I've ever seen them, and I would be interested to see them.
Thanks. We'll have to probably dig into that one. I'm not really sure I understand what that was probably back in the time. So maybe Ann does.
Yeah, so it's actually Peter would be the person who would talk about it. And I don't know where we're at on it. He is on here, but I don't think we're prepared to talk about it tonight. And I really appreciate that we've made time for this. We are starting to veer into more of a policy discussion about just generally from right away. And we probably want to move that back to a council meeting at a future date. Unfortunately, those are a little booked. But the real point of tonight was, this is Spencer. He's wonderful, and he knows he can answer questions for us about right away. And we will have him on as a contractor in the coming months so that we can have more conversations and give you all a little bit more information about where we're heading. If there are some money specific questions that we want to talk about tonight that will help you going into budget, this is the time to do it because we won't be talking to him until afterwards. But otherwise, I would recommend that we move this to a council meeting.
So I'm assuming we're going to move on from here, right? So the next item on the agenda is the capital improvement plan, which will be presented by Kelly Brooks, Peter Passarelli, Steve Adams, and Jennifer Garbelli. I hope I said that right.
Garbly.
Garbly.
Yeah, and as they're all coming back in, Spencer, I just wanted to thank you. We were really appreciative that you joined us tonight. And Bonnie and I will be in, well, actually, Keith and I will probably be in touch in the next week. So thank you so much for coming.
Very good. Thank you. Good night.
Well, good evening. I'm Peter Passarelli, and I've got the honor tonight actually of running the presentation and starting it off. So let me bear with me for a minute as I share my screen. Keith, can you allow me to share my screen? Keith, it's still disabled there for me. All right. Nope, it's still disabled, Keith. Well, I guess as we're waiting, I guess I can start off with some introductory information. So, as you all are aware, our city has several utilities that we run. Our Public Works Department manages and operates for the city. Our water system, our wastewater system, our storm system. And then we also have our transportation utility, our SAFE and SSMP. And SAFE is our safe access for everyone. And SSMP is our street surface maintenance program. And our Public Works Department and Engineering Department work hand in hand in developing our capital improvement program. And over the past several months, all the way starting back in November, myself and Steve Adams and Jennifer met with our Community Utility Advisory Board, which is Corey Hester is here tonight, and Ed Simmons from the board. And we've met on a monthly basis to start talking about our capital improvement plan. And as we were developing that plan, we also took a look at what we're going to need for our future revenue requirements that would sort of drive our recommendations for rate recommendations to the group.
Peter, Keith has his hand up, and it may be that he has some information on.
Yes, Keith. No? I think maybe if you make me a co-host, that'll do the trick.
You're muted, Keith.
Yeah, I still don't have that screen sharing.
Yeah, he was having some technical issues where he got locked up, so give him a moment. And for whatever reason, I'm a co-host and I can't promote you to co-host either.
Well, as I was saying, over the past several months, we met as a group and developed some recommendations to bring to the group tonight as they relate to our utilities. As we develop those recommendations, we took a look at several things. We took a look at our operations and maintenance needs that each of those utilities have, as well as our capital improvement needs that we've identified in our current master plans, and also our draft master plans that we have for our water and wastewater utilities. So we use those documents there to help us develop our CIP and help us forecast those projects that we anticipated in the future as well. And the combination of that operations and maintenance budget and our CIP budget help determine our revenue needs. So we look at, where do we stand based on those revenue needs versus what we have within each of those funds. And we look to see if there's a gap there. And there's several ways to cover that gap. One is certainly by making increases to the rates. And then there's also the opportunity for debt financing as it responds to our capital improvement needs.
Hey, Peter, you should be a co-host. No one can share.
Perfect. Okay, can everybody see that now? Perfect. So we're going to sort of follow up with a little bit of a discussion on our rates and those recommendations for our upcoming biennium budget. And then I think Jennifer Garbley and Steve will perhaps talk a little bit about our integrated CIP. And then we'll also take a look at some of the other large impact projects that we have that we're forecasting for construction in our 23 and 24 biennium budget. So I talked a little bit about our utilities and sort of the process that we went through over the past several months to determine our revenue requirements and in turn, the recommendations for rate adjustments for those utilities. And what I'm sharing with you here tonight is, we're forecasting the need for some minor adjustments on the water and wastewater side, about 2.5% for each year. And specifically on the water side, we're looking at that utility seems to be in pretty good shape for a couple reasons. One, we are getting ready, and we'll talk about it a little bit later in the presentation. But one of the big projects that we have, our Stanley Reservoir project, we're going to use some ARPA money to cover the cost of that. So that helps us reduce the need for additional revenues. But sort of the long-term projection indicates that even in the following biennium budget, we probably only are looking at a 2.5% increase there for FY25 and 26 based on our current projections from revenues, expenses, and our capital programs. On the wastewater side, a similar projection, 2.5% increases for the upcoming biennium, with a projected 2.5% increase in FY25 and 26. Although we may, because of some larger capital-intensive projects coming up on the wastewater side, we may be at a point in FY25 into 26, we may need to take a look at doing some capital project financing to prevent a large increase in rates. On the storm side, we're actually forecasting or recommending a 0% increase for the next 2 years on the storm. And then as we move into FY25 and 26, a 2.5% increase in each of those years. And then our projection in FY27 indicates that we might need to do project financing at that point. As we move into FY25, 26, and 27, we have some pretty big projects there, integrated projects that impact the wastewater and stormwater systems in particular. There's a North Milwaukie improvement project that has some significant expenditures and needs for both wastewater and water and storm. So that's why we're seeing that perhaps the need to do some project financing at that time. On the transportation side for SAFE and SSMP, we actually ended up deferring our debt financing in our current biennium. We ended up having the cash, the necessary cash on hand to do the projects that were ready to go to construction during these past 2 fiscal years. But what that does set up is in our upcoming proposed budget, we're going to need to do that debt financing at some point in FY23 into 24, depending on project execution. In both the SAFE and SSMP funds have an automatic adjustment that's tied to our Seattle Construction Cost Index. And what we've been using is the 5-year average. And that 5-year average as of December 2021 was 4.6%. So we're recommending a 4.6% for each of those SSMP funds. Any questions? And I think I have the next slide has sort of the general impact.
Peter, can I ask a quick question? You said storm, the increase might be in 25, 26, but the slide said 27. I just wanted to see which one of those it was.
Well, what I was saying was in FY27, we might need to do some capital financing.
Okay. Thank you.
So I would say that these minor increases sort of in general cover our sort of operations and maintenance expenses, and they're not really set up to generate additional revenue for large projects. The cash that we have on hand for water and wastewater allow us to get through this, and stormwater allow us to get through the next 2 fiscal years without having to do any capital financing. On the transportation side, though, we do have, like I said, there's lots of projects there, and I think Jennifer is going to go through those projects here in a little bit. I did want to share the rate impact for an average customer. And our average customer uses 6 CCF of water, which is about 4,500 gallons a month. And if you look on the on the right side of the screen, July 22 and 23, those recommended rate adjustments impact the average customer by about $2.81 for the first fiscal year, and then another $2.95 for the second fiscal year. And that's per month. Any questions? Okay.
Just so I understand this, we're looking at 2.5% each year.
That is correct.
Thanks.
for water and sewer, and on the stormwater side, 0% increase.
I have a question. At the bottom of this slide, the maximum SSMP and SAFE, is that a cap? So somebody's bill wouldn't go over that, or can you?
There's a cap for those fees for our larger customers, our commercial and industrial customers. Yeah, that's what that is. Any other questions there? Well, if there aren't any other questions, I'm gonna turn it over to Jennifer to talk about our integrated CIP projects.
Let's go to the first slide, Peter. So we've got two projects that are currently under construction that will cross over this fiscal year from 22. Well, we're in 22 to 23. And so that's 42nd and 43rd safe improvements. We are underway construction. We've got the sewer work completed at this point, except for a couple service laterals that we got to pick up off of 43rd on the south side. The completion date is anticipated September 22. So we are going to really wrap this up just after fiscal year 23 pretty much starts. I would say the great part is it's moving pretty smoothly and pretty quickly. It's definitely always an impact with construction. So we've had to do a few detours in order to install the sewer work, but at the same time, everyone's being safe and we haven't had too many issues. People don't love having extra people on the roads, but we're making do as far as that goes. The sidewalks on 42nd are wrapping up within the next couple of weeks, and then we'll really be focusing on 43rd, and that's a 10-foot path on the west side and then a 5-foot sidewalk on the east side. All new curbs, and then we'll finish up in the fall with a grind and inlay of the whole street, which is exciting. If anyone has any questions, please jump in. Next slide. So our 2021 SAFE and SSMP improvements is really what we call home and wood. And so home manages from King Road all the way to Railroad. We are putting safe improvements on this street, and it involves a sidewalk from Railroad to King on the west side of the street. There is some sidewalk on the east side that will be maintained. We also have a sewer project that's deep in this area that connects. And then this street had really low amount of asphalt actually on the ground. And so originally we wanted to send this out earlier, but what we turned around to do is, hey, we need to actually reevaluate, and we're actually doing a full reconstruction of home and wood. Wood does not have any safe improvements. It is just a street project, but it is a full rebuild. So these two streets will be completed. We're looking at December 2022 this year. Next slide.
Uh-oh.
It's stuck.
There we go.
All right, a little bit about Monroe Street Greenway. So really, I would look at this as a big program because there's lots of different segments for this. The exciting part is we are getting ready to sign our final IGA with Metro for the RFA funds. And so we anticipate design kicking off in fiscal 23, to actually start that and then to build in 24, maybe stretching a little bit into 25, depending on how fast things move. the hard part about that from a city perspective is Metro and ODOT will run that program, and we're kind of we're helping. We don't drive the bus on that one. Then the state will provide, ODOT will be providing, or starting the intersection at Highway 224. We are working with them to figure out those tie-ins and just how it manages and connects to this project. However, they would be running that program as well. But then they did give us funds in order to do connections, and that's the transitions on either side of that intersection next of that oval. And so we will have 1.5 million that the city actually gets to run and manage. So that will actually be an in-house, not an in-house, but we will hire a consultant and we will manage that project ourselves. The other exciting part is we've got Monroe Apartments going in, and that is also, they are building a pretty good section, and that's called Segment D, constructed by private development. And so they are picking up a pretty good section on Monroe and then down 37th before it hits Washington. Next slide. So Meek North, we've finished this last fiscal year south phase. And so now we have the north phase to finish up. It was originally split into two because the Monroe Apartments was coming in and we needed a connection for them. So they're ready to go. They can connect. Right now, we've been having difficulty with the railroad to agree to sell the property for the second stormwater pond. They've got a proposal. They have 1 month basically to either accept that proposal or staff will be moving forward. I have two other options if the railroad doesn't want to sell us the actual property for the stormwater pond. Option one is we just get a pipe easement from there and we build the pond in another location, either on a private development or instead of building a pond, doing a underground large pipe for storage capacity. That's what we're looking for, is storage, or something by the Roswell facility, depending on what's there. If that doesn't come through, then the final option then is to actually install a pump station and take the pipeline up to 29th Street to Roswell. So my goal is to hopefully really move this forward and build it this next biennium. Next slide. So here's our Ardenwald North improvements.
Jennifer, Lisa's got a question.
Oh, I can't see, so just speak up, Lisa.
Thanks. Just Roswell Pond has the capacity to handle it if we can get it there. Is that what you're saying?
I would need to do some analysis on that. Ideally, I may put something in the right of way just for storage to collect the water before it makes it to Roswell to provide more capacity. So there's a little analysis that does need to happen, but it does need to get to the Roswell facility. That's where this north connection does go in, is Roswell. So,
and then at the start, when you were talking about the railroad, you said they have a proposal and they have a month. And if they don't agree to sell, then you're pursuing one of these other options. Is that what you were saying? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've been negotiating with them and talking with them since 2017. At this point, I can't wait any longer. So we have infrastructure in place, and we need to get it completed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So Ardenwald North improvements. This is one of our nice bundled projects that's pretty exciting. It's an in-house design. It is getting closer. So we're approaching basically 60% design. And so we're anticipating going out kind of this summer to bid for construction. It has utility work, which is water, wastewater, and stormwater. And then it also impacts and has SAFE and SSMP. The design around Ardenwald North is going to be more around a shared roadway and walkway vermouth. And then it also has SSMP. So we're looking at construction in our fiscal year 23, and then completing it in 24. Next slide.
Ardenwald North, where is that?
So it's part of Vanwater, Roswell, a little bit of 30 seconds more ramps and crossings. There's 32nd will be picking up on an actual, or Ardenwald South will pick up majority of actually 32nd. 29th, it goes all the way down to 29th. And I think there's one more street in there. I'd have to look it up.
There's also some utility work on 30th and 31st.
Thanks, Steve. Any other questions?
When you say fiscal year 2023, you don't expect it to be finished in 2023, or are you saying it'll start at some point in fiscal year 2023?
I'll start construction in 23. It may drop over to 24 just a little bit. It kind of depends on the contractor, and how late it goes out to bid. So if we don't get it out until, if we get it out in June, then I think they could finish it up by the following June, right? But if we don't get it out until like September, then we're probably going to be kind of the end of the next summer instead.
I have a question. This shared cars and walkway, it's going to be part of Roswell and then down to Vanwater along 32nd. Is that?
Not on 32nd. So this would be the more neighboring streets on like Vanwater. So basically I would say more west of 32nd. East of 32nd, we're approaching the school, and so that definitely has sidewalks.
So it'll go as far as the school, is what you're saying?
Not towards the school. It'll be west of 32nd.
Okay.
In the more neighboring, smaller, low traffic streets is what we're looking at that have very low volume.
So we're talking Ardenwald Northwest.
Yeah, so it's Jennifer, it's between like 29th and 32nd.
Yes.
Those are the roads on between those sections, not beyond 32nd.
Correct.
Not east of 32nd.
Okay. So, but there was some comment about Roswell in there.
There's a little bit of this work on Roswell as I believe there's a few ramps that need to be replaced. Roswell does have some sidewalks, so there's some gaps and some non-compliant ramps that are getting picked up as part of this project.
Okay, it doesn't have anything to do with the new houses that are going in on that corner?
No. Okay. If they're building new houses, they're responsible for the infrastructure.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next slide. So it's really exciting. Our Washington's area improvement project. I should have put a map up here. I didn't think that through correctly. But Washington area improvements was in our current CIP called Milwaukie El Punte Elementary, and we kind of moved away from that name because really we're doing a lot of work on Washington, and so it really was encompassing on Washington. A majority of the utility work is on Washington and some on 27th. So we've got from Lake Road on 27th to Washington, safe improvements happening. On Washington, we have safe improvements, more spot locations depending on where we're at on Washington, from 23rd to 35th Street. We have water, wastewater, and stormwater on this project. We did outsource this. AKS is doing our design. So they are approaching about 30% design within the next month or so. So they're moving along. We hope to go out to bid in about a year, basically, from now. Which means we'll be in that kind of construction period of 24, possibly 25, due to the size of this project. This is a $5 to $6 million project, so a little bit larger, one of our larger projects. Next slide. So here's a few other projects we've got. We have Waverly South. It's a water, wastewater, safe, and SSMP. We're anticipating designing it in fiscal year 23 in-house and then going out to bid, going out for construction in 24.
Can you define what's in Waverly South and what's in Waverly Heights when you're talking about these?
So Waverly South is it's in the Lava Road area, and it's there's a private water, not private, but it's a private road that the water needs a fix, water line and sewer. And then there's some safe aspects, some ramps in that area of lava that need to be repaired or need to be installed. So that's the safe aspect. And then we have a little SSMP to kind of finish it out. As far as Waverly Heights sewer, that's completely only sewer work up in the in actual Waverly Heights. In the sewer work is in the back of all these $1 million homes. So that's a really large project that we are kind of gearing up for. It's one of those projects that's been kind of pushed down the line for the last 20 years. I mean, we've had information about it, that it's needed to be repaired. It doesn't need to be, we don't need more capacity. We just need new pipe. So this is the last of our clay pipe within the city of Milwaukie. And clay pipe for us hasn't been great. Like, it's deteriorated, it's collapsed, it gets a lot of root intrusion, a lot of infiltration. They're smaller pipe segments, and so you have more spots where plants and vegetation can try to reach for the water and kind of hurt our sewer system. So it is critical that we actually finally move this forward, because I think a majority of our infiltration issues is coming from Waverly Heights, with this being the last of the clay pipe system. And it's not the only spot you have I&I infiltration, other locations, but really Waverly Heights is, I think, one that we might see some huge improvements. We also are looking at getting some funding through WES, through their program, to help reduce I&I throughout their larger region. So we're going to try to leverage this project and hopefully help bring in some money through WES, which would be fantastic.
And I think if I can just add on to that, Jennifer, too, I think the overall project budget is a little over $3 million for that. So we're anticipating getting about $1 million from WES for this project with that regional I&I agreement that hopefully you guys are going to approve tomorrow night.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
That's great. So didn't we also hear that there's a line under Milwaukie Bay Park, and I can't remember if that's water or stormwater? I mean, water or wastewater?
We have a wastewater. Yeah. That's how we have a siphon and everything that crosses, that comes under Milwaukie Bay Park to the treatment plant.
And was that replaced in recent years, or is that also like older and needs to be replaced before we build a new park on top of it?
Actually, I think part of that is actually okay. It's more the siphon that needs a little bit of help, which is not in an area is in an area that we should be able to access. And
there's actually two places where the sewer line crosses. One place it crosses Johnson Creek, and then it also crosses Kellogg, that confluence of the Kellogg and Willamette.
And this Waverly Heights will actually probably help that situation too, because if we can lower how much I&I infiltration is coming into Waverly Heights, that comes down through that Milwaukie Bay pipeline. So really, if we can reduce some of our I&I heading towards the treatment plant, will help increase that capacity and the life of that line.
I just couldn't remember, there was a talk years ago about, the crossing of Johnson Creek and sort of new pipes, and I couldn't remember if we had upgraded those already or, where that was. So I was just curious.
It's not in my near future CIP or master planning. So then we will, Harvey's under design. That's an in-house design. You're going to ask me the boundaries of this one too, probably. So Harvey is about 30 seconds down to, this is roughly 32nd to about 42nd. It's a major water project, actually, besides a SAFE project. We have quite a bit of funds. We have some transmission main and some service lines that need to be replaced or transferred over to our new transmission main. And then, so it's currently at about a 30%, so a little further down than our Ardenwald North project. But when that's complete, then we're anticipating to go out for construction as well. Our wastewater improvements for 2021, this had been put on hold as we had lost a staff member. I've now filled that position, and it is currently at about a 50% design level, and we're anticipating going out to bid in June. So that's exciting to move those forward. That's
just random pieces around town that are lumped into one project. Is that what
it's three? Yeah, it's three random kind of little spots. One's on Kent Street. One's on, I think, 37th. And I forget the third one at this moment, but it's three kind of wastewater open trench projects that we're pulling all together. It's about a $600,000, so a little bit smaller project, but all wastewater. We'll want to move it and get it done, get it off our plates so we can focus on other things.
Number 3 is Washington Street, according to your report.
Perfect. And it's Washington Street. That's it's not part of the Milwaukie El Punte. It's Washington further. I think it's around 38th Street, actually, off of Washington. So International Way and Mullard, we will start designing that in 2024. And so that's kind of our up and coming new bundle project. We're thinking that's going to be an in-house design for International Way. King Road, I don't know if I talked about King Road. That's kind of our, that's another big one that we are anticipating to go out to consultant to do. It is pretty much a big SAFE project. So we've narrowed it down to 42nd, the complete all the way to Lenwood. I don't know if you drive King Road a lot, but that's definitely my route to home. I can't tell you how many times I've seen, not necessarily just bicycles, but people in wheelchairs and motorized wheelchairs going down the bike lane. So these are definitely sidewalks that we're pretty passionate about that we need to fix. And the ramps are completely non-compliant. So yeah, we're excited to start moving that one forward. It is a big project, and we are going to use a consultant to help us design that project. Next slide. So after we finish all of that, what will come up next for design would be our Ardenwald South, which would include a majority of 32nd and paving 32nd. And then we have Logus, 40th, and 42nd as another bundled project that would be up and coming as well. Lots of work, lots of things to do. Any other questions?
I have a question about what the one that has to do with Logus Road. Is any of that project actually planned for Logus Road, or is it just? And if so, what what part of Locust Road?
No, I don't remember. Locust Road is so far out.
Okay. Well, I'm sure I'll.
I'm pretty sure it's to finish the sidewalk from where the sidewalks end now down to 43rd, right?
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, that was always the plan.
Well, sidewalk, Locust Road dead ends into 43rd.
Right. But the sidewalks that were built back when Jeff Klein was here, who I know you.
But those are down at the other end of Locust.
Right.
They're from 49th to,
this is to
Stanton.
All right. I got it for you. So it's, safe improvements are on 40th Avenue, reconstructing roadway surface on 40th Avenue from Harvey Street to King Road. Locust Road is fill in sidewalk gaps, replace portions of existing sidewalk, and remove barriers, which could be retaining walls, power poles.
And is that, which part of Locust is that, is I guess what my question is.
Oh, 43rd to 49th.
Okay. Thank you.
You are welcome. Any other questions I can help you with?
Thank you for the excellent presentation.
You're welcome.
Got a couple other projects to talk about. I mentioned earlier we have our Stanley Reservoir project. This is our large ground reservoir off of Stanley at the park there, and it hasn't been painted in quite a long time. I mean, you can tell from the picture. The tank on its exterior is, you can certainly tell that the coating is deteriorating. It's actually flaking off in some pretty big pieces. And on the interior is in much better condition, but it needs to be recoated. So what we're looking at doing is really doing a full rehabilitation on this tank, and what that consists of removing both coating systems on the outside of the tank and on the inside of the tank. And then we're also looking at doing some seismic upgrades to the system, putting down, replacing and improving the anchor bolts that anchor it down to the ground, doing some work on the overflow pipes. There's some interior work in terms of the connections and the beams that we have and rafters that we have on the inside of the tank, and improving that, those components of the tank, because they're subject to some pretty significant twisting if there's a seismic event. So we're going to do some work on that. There's also some work in terms of improving how the water is mixed in the tank as it goes into the tank. There's a mixing system that we're going to do there. Overall, it's about a $2.7 million project. We have that project fully designed right now. We are going to use some ARPA funding for that we received from the federal government. And that's ideally, that's going to cover that full cost of that upgrade there. Before we do this, though, one of the things that we want to do this fall is we're going to do some maintenance on our well number 6 that is adjacent to this reservoir. And what that's going to consist of is really pulling the pump out of that well, inspecting it, doing any maintenance, fixing any things that might need to be done, and bring it back online before we take this tank down, so we can make sure that we don't have a problem with that well when the tank is offline. We do anticipate that, taking that tank offline does cause some fire flow deficiencies in some parts of the community. And what we're going to do is sort of model and get a better understanding what those fire flow deficiencies look like, and see how we can alleviate those deficiencies. That may require us to get water from one of our other adjacent water providers, or put some additional sort of offline storage that we can pump into, some smaller tanks that we can pump into to have some offline storage there. So we're anticipating that this project's going to bid in the spring of next year, 23, and then we'll probably do that construction in the fall. This tank's going to be completely shrouded and contained as they blast it. There is some lead coating on the exterior of the tank that has to be removed. So the contractor will blast it and capture any of the lead paint. So yeah, this is a big project and an important one. So, any questions on this?
Do you know what the age is of the coatings? I don't know if I remember that detail from any of I'm just curious if you don't off the top of your head.
I think it's from the 70s. Yeah, I don't think when I talked to Don Simonson before he retired, that was what he thought it was. He didn't think it had been coated since then. I mean, we've done some touch-up painting and some cleaning on it, but it hasn't been recoated.
Can you remind us what the ARPA funding is, and then just making sure I heard you right? You said it was going to cover the whole 2.7 million, or just part of it?
It will cover the whole 2.7 million, and that's what is it? The American Recovery. Bonnie, can you help me there? It's that.
Sorry, Callie. We ended up getting, I believe, $4.8 million from the federal government during the pandemic. Originally, we had talked about putting a portion of the money towards CIP and a portion towards our reserves, basically to take in cash that was foregone revenue during the pandemic. What we realized in this budgeting process is it was more transparent for those two things to both go towards the CIP projects, so that the public can actually see where the dollars are. It's an easy way for us to narrate this. We still have about $800,000 that we're holding in another place for the council for a discussion we're having about some priorities that they have. But we took basically the CIP money and the funds that we were going to use to replace lost revenue and put all of those into the CIP for this budget cycle. It's a great question. Thank you.
Okay. I did want to talk about our SCADA project, and this is something that I've been working on since I've been here. It seems like, we actually started down this path in 2018 when we hired a consultant to help us develop a master plan to take a look at our SCADA system and how we could bring it back, how we could bring it up and upgrade it to meet our current needs. So our current SCADA system and SCADA stands for Supervisory Control and Automated Data Acquisition. So think of it as it's the computer system that we use for our water and wastewater utility to operate the system remotely. So that means we can operate the water system and tell things to turn on and turn off from our desktop without having to have somebody at one of the wells to go push a button. So this is that system that we're able to do that. It also monitors and helps us manage our wastewater system at our pump stations to make sure that we're pumping wastewater when we need to pump wastewater. So it's a really critical system. But the current system was constructed and it put in place in the early 90s. And there really hasn't been any significant upgrades to it since then. So we are basically in the process of replacing the entire system, both on the communications and computer network architecture and field automation pieces. So we did award a contract with Tetra Tech to do the design and SCADA application development, and we are currently finalizing our communications contract package. I think we're going to go out for solicit bids at the end of March, at the end of this upcoming month, to do that work. And then after that, we'll be sending out our field automation construction package to do that at the end of April. And ideally, all of this work will be done by about February of 23. Overall, it's about a $1.5 million project. And it's taken us a lot longer to do for several reasons. So one, we started the design of this, right, sort of as the pandemic was kicking off. And that really sort of impacted our ability to have consultants, some of the consultants that we were working with, to come out and do some of the site visits in the early part of the pandemic. We got past some of those pieces, and then we were impacted by some staff issues. We had one of our critical employees that needed to be involved with this process was out for an extended period of time due to a health-related issue, and that impacted sort of the design workshops that we had and that timing there. We were also impacted by some changes in our IT staff and a loss of personnel there, and a conversion to using some consultant to help out. And that impacted some of the router and the network infrastructure that the IT was doing. That's part of this. And then, we frankly have had some impacts caused by supply chain issues. That's it impacted sort of technology quite a lot. Routers in particular, that were an important part of our system. But I think we've gotten past those issues, and like I said, we're getting ready to go out for bids here at the end of this upcoming month and into April. Any questions on that?
Peter, I do think that this is the end of this set, right? The next thing would be the Good Neighbor.
I think it is the end, yes.
Okay, can we clear out of the PowerPoint just for a few minutes to talk and then go back in for that piece? Thanks. So the purpose of tonight really was to give you all a chance. In the past, we haven't had a discussion about the CIP and about our rates until the rates have already been set, and there's really not a lot of change that can go into the budget because we've already done all the cycles backwards. So we did just want to give you all a chance to talk about any of the projects or to have any questions that you may have before we proceed down the path. Any concerns with the rates that we're talking about that you want to send towards our CUAB members, or are you generally okay with where we're at? Go for it, Mayor.
Just a quick one. The concept of a cap on utility fees for the largest users of the utilities. I've personally never understood that idea. So can somebody A, explain why there's a cap, B, how many entities ever hit that cap?
I think it was put in the ordinance when we did it to cap those fees on SAFE and SSMP before, when those fees were developed. I can certainly provide you the information on how many customers that are impacted by that. It's not a whole lot. but I don't have that readily available right now. But I do have it in some of the information that I had gotten from finance as we were looking at the rate projections.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
I just want to clarify. So there's not a cap when you're talking about water and wastewater. It's just on or storm.
It's on safe and necessary.
Safe and necessary. Okay.
Right. So I would be interested in hearing that and getting some idea of what financially we're talking about.
I can do that.
Cool. Thanks.
Anything else? So of the 4.8 million, we've basically moved about $4 million towards the capital assets of the city from the ARPA funds. And then we have another 800,000 that we have off to the side that we're still doing some due diligence on whether or not we can spend it, probably towards, with the intention of being towards housing, whether that's SDCs or something else in order to support the type of development the council's been talking about. So that's still work that Joseph is doing, but everything else is included in the CIP.
So what's the other 1.3 million?
It's 4.8. So, oh, you mean what's in the CIP?
Right. You told us where 2.7 is. So where's the other 1.3?
The other 1.3 we're using in our wastewater utility.
So projects that are going into Jennifer's integrated transportation programming are the other major ones. Okay. Then I think that we have everything we need for taking it back to CUAB, and then we would close this out until we started the budget process at the end of April. We did make a commitment when we were changing the structure of the KGNC to be a decision by council for the funding that's provided by West, that we would have a public discussion about that. So we've actually added it here. And I believe, Peter, is that up next or is that later in the evening?
I think that's next.
It is next.
Perfect. I will leave it to him. Does that work, Leslie?
Yes, that's next. I'm ready to move forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen again. Can everybody see that now? Okay. Good Neighbor Fund. So as Ann mentioned, we wanted to spend a little bit of time to talk about our Good Neighbor Fund and where we are with that. I did have I have had some conversations with our CUAB over the past couple months about our Good Neighbor Fund, as well as Wes. So just to fill everybody in and provide some context. So over the last couple of years, Wes has implemented a new Good Neighbor model. And it was really it was based off of the success that they had with our Good Neighbor program that we had here, our Keller Good Neighbor program. And they looked at Gladstone and Oregon City and have implemented a new model there, and have proposed to Milwaukie for us to use this new model. And that new model would basically really allow us an expansion of both of the funds, and both in purpose and geographically. It would allow Milwaukie to directly manage those funds. The old model, Wes managed those funds. So the Good Neighbor Committee would propose the expenditure of funds. We would bring it to council. Council would approve that by resolution, and then it would go back to Wes, and Wes would use those funds. This new model, West provides us the funds, and then we can use those funds as long as they meet certain requirements. So I've been working with Wes to take a look at how we can expand that boundary. There's some parameters for that boundary. They want to make sure that there's an identified area of impact that focuses on some of the stream corridors and also special project areas that might be projects, priorities for the city that also protect water quality. And in general, if those projects are in that boundary, they're eligible to use Good Neighbor funds if they meet a couple different purposes, recreational improvements a lot in those areas, an enhancement of fish and wildlife and habitat and riparian areas, as well as sort of public education related to wastewater and surface water management. So the current boundary that we have in our IGA looks something like this. It's a 200-yard buffer that surrounds the Kellogg treatment facility. And this is located right off of 99, next to the Island Station and historic Milwaukie neighborhoods. The discussions that I've had with Wes to date sort of allow us to expand the areas. And what I've done is I've put together a map, and I've highlighted with the dashed red areas in terms of how we could potentially expand those areas along, certainly close to the impact area that near the treatment plant, but we could also expand it out into these riparian corridors that we have that run through the city, through the Kellogg Creek boundary, Johnson Creek, both along our western part of the city and the northeastern part of the city, and also our Minthorn Springs area as well. And then back in along Rusk Road and through Clackamas Park. In the discussions that I had with Wes last week, they were supportive of this boundary, those boundaries. We haven't finalized it, but they were supportive of what that looks like. Are there any questions on that?
Yeah, Peter, you may have said it and I was just too busy staring at the map, but what's the buffer? How many feet away from the stream is the area?
We really haven't settled on how many feet away from that stream, what that might be. Mm-hmm. But they were supportive of doing work along those boundaries. So, I would suggest something like, at a minimum of like 100 feet along the boundaries of those streams and corridors.
And those funds would be, there's a lot of private property along those corridors as well. So I'm just curious how the funds might be expended on, if they would be available to private property owners, and if you've thought about how that would all work.
Well, they could be available to private property owners for work that relates to making improvements to their as it backs up to their properties and it relates to that riparian habitat, if it's going to improve that habitat.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. I think this is really interesting, by the way. I like the creativity I see here.
As I understood the staff report, there's about until 2029, when we pay off debt or something, there's about $50,000 a year. Is that right?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah.
Okay. And then starting in 2029, there would be more. There would be 180 or something. So, I mean, I sit on the North Clackamas Watershed Council board, so I see a lot of things to like here. I know that they are in the process of what they call the Watershed Action Plan, where they're trying to identify things in the creek, little dams and little things that people have built in the creeks. And, so that at the day whenever the big dam comes out, that we've identified more of the other impediments to fish passage. So I do see some, potential things, even not necessarily on private land. But I will go back to the fact that this plant, there was a reason why it was drawn 200 yards around the plant, because the plant does have impacts on the neighbors. And although the odors are much improved, there are still odors. I called at least 4 times in 2021 on odors. So I'm a little concerned about drawing this larger area. And I would think at a minimum that we should ask you or someone to go have this discussion at those 2 neighborhood association meetings, because we kind of didn't give them very good notice of the dissolution of the Good Neighbor Committee. And I think we owe it to them to have this discussion with them.
Sure. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question real quick? Under the current situation, Wes collects the money and then they give it back to us when we have a Good Neighbor project. And what would be different is they would collect the money and they would just give it back to us and we could decide how to spend it.
Right. So we'll have to set up a separate fund and manage those funds. And then through engagement with the community and working actually with the Community Utility Advisory Board, we would provide some engagement opportunities with the community to help us also determine how to perhaps spend those funds. Ideally, and dependent on what that final boundary looks like, the staff would provide recommendations on potential projects as well.
Could you bond against that stream of funds that you're going to get back and then go out and maybe, solve the Kellogg Creek Dam issue?
I don't think there's enough money to do that. I do have a
part of it anyways.
Yeah. I have some more to share here beyond that. Let me just to talk about some of the financial components of the Good Neighbor funds. So, currently as of February this year, there's about almost $270,000. And talking with Wes, the plan would be that those funds would be transferred to the city. And then the city would receive an annual distribution based off of $1 per EDU per month. And that's that equivalent dwelling unit sort of treatment charge that Wes charges. That's what that's based off of, the EDU. Our current count of EDUs, and this adjusts based off of new development and also changes in the number of customers that we have. But currently it's about almost 11,300, 277. And that generates about $135,000 a year. About $85,000 of it, as Councilor Beatty mentioned, is currently allocated for some debt service payments related to the Milwaukie Bay Park Boat Dock project, which we anticipate to pay off in 2029.
Peter, can I ask a quick question? Is that current fund balance of 270 roughly, does that reflect the 2022 debt service payment, or is that yet to be made?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thanks.
I'd
be good to know, because that's a chunk of change.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't include the payment that we would receive at the end of this month, the 11.
Right.
So there's another 11,277 going back into there. But I can find that out. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. And where we were sort of on the next steps is finalizing the IGA with Wes, and Justin, our attorney's been working on that, and he's proposed some changes to the language from what they have for Gladstone and Oregon City, because we're a little bit differently. We're a little different. They were sort of sharing a prorated fund. We also need to firm up and finalize that boundary with Wes. I did meet with them last week, and conceptually they felt pretty good about what that boundary looked like. But they haven't had the eyes on the map to sort of see if they had any specific concerns. And then once that was done, we bring the agreement back to City Council for approval. And then over the next several months, we'll work to develop some good neighbor related projects, and then provide opportunities for interested stakeholders at future CUAB meetings on those proposed projects. And with a recommendation from CUAB to forward those for approval to council.
Peter, I don't want to pull us away. This easily could become a conversation that's more policy than budget, so I don't want to pull us in that direction. But since we did have odor come up, could you just talk a little bit about the funds that will continue to be available through the Good Neighbor Agreement, specifically for odor control at the plant, and discussions with Wes around ongoing odor control projects as part of this work?
Well, Wes continues to make improvements to the facility, and their next big project is making some changes on how they manage the biosolids at the facility, with the plan to actually reduce the amount of to make improvements that help dewater the biosolids. And when I say biosolids, that's the leftover sludge. So they're working to reduce the amount of water in those solids that will in turn reduce the number of trucks that they have to come and pick up and pick up that sludge, those biosolids, and take it to another place for application, for land application. So that work, in fact, will also reduce the odors as well at that facility. And they've got a pretty significant project that they're planning on doing there as well. They continue to certainly have their signs up about odor control. Both Greg Geist and Greg Irely are are fully committed to, in keeping odors down at those facilities. And the dollars that we have with the Good Neighbor funds, we can certainly apply those if the need arises for future improvements at the plant as well.
I think what I was referring to, Peter, was specifically that there was a seed fund when this was initially set up, and there's still roughly $300,000 remaining.
That is correct. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So I just wanted to call out that there are still funds available in the Good Neighbor Fund to support further odor control work, and Wes is committed to spending those funds on that.
That's correct. I was thinking of trying to think of the other projects.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have been so oblique.
Yep. Are there any other questions? I don't have, I think that I don't have anything else then.
Perfect. Do you mind closing out of the presentation? And I also just wanted to say this. I saw that Corey needed to leave, but Ed, I think we're actually also done with anything related to CUAB tonight. If you'd like to have a break from us. If you want to stay, we'd love to have you, but it's up to you.
I guess one other thing I did want to mention, I did notify previous Keller Good Neighbor Committee members of this meeting and future opportunities that we're going to have to talk about good neighbor funding priorities.
So I guess the next item on the agenda is one that I added about the possibility of a municipal bank, which was proposed sometime last year. And given the length of the agenda, I don't actually want to make a big presentation about it. I spent a fair amount of time working with people, and it turned out to be a little more complex than I thought it would be. But since it's still an active issue, as I understand, I wanted to share basically what I found out about it. And I approached it from the point of view of what the effects could be on the city of Milwaukie. I know that there are a lot of committed people out there working on this idea, but I was somewhat surprised at the complexity of it, given that there are constitutional prohibitions about public banking in Oregon, and given that Milwaukie is such a small city, the idea that we would gift funds to capitalize the bank was somewhat new to me. So having said that, and I guess what I really want to say also is I apologize for the fact that it was so lengthy. My technical skills are deteriorating apparently, and I couldn't figure out how to get links to the PDF. So I did want people to see what I was talking about, but I hope nobody printed it all out. Having said that, if anybody wants to ask me any questions about what is in that report, I'll be glad to answer it, or to the degree that I can.
Leslie, I would just say thank you very much for please don't apologize for the length. I actually really appreciate your robust report, and I will admit to not having digested it all completely, having just been able to, I plan on digging into it a lot more, so that I can be a little bit more prepared for the next time it does come up to council, because I do suspect we'll hear about, we'll be discussing it again. And I plan on at least relying pretty much on this report. So I really appreciate you actually putting so much effort into it. Obviously, I can't imagine how much time it took you, but I really appreciate you lending your experience, your expertise to us and helping us consider some of these questions that we should have been asking. And so thank you for doing that.
And I'll second that. You answered questions I didn't know I had, in a really accessible
me
way.
either. I didn't know I had those questions either until I got into it.
Yeah, no, this is really great. I really appreciate all that you must have put into this, and you anticipated questions that I would have had once I understood to the level that you brought me to with your research. So this is terrific. I kind of want to share it out to the Oregon State Legislature to give them a perspective from someone who deeply understands banking. And, if this is something that they're going to pursue, I want to be sure that they have a perspective from a smaller city. And I know you're going to say you're not an expert in banking. I get that. You say that at the very top, but you do have an organizational perspective that is very valuable. And you do understand finances in a way that sheds light on a topic that's really complex. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd like to add my thanks too. That was a ton of work and very interesting read. Just a little update for everyone. That bill didn't come back in the short session. However, a bill to, I always forget the term, but to bring it to a vote of the people, whether to allow the state of Oregon to have an
initiative. Are you talking about an initiative?
No, it was a referral. The legislature was asked to refer a ballot measure that would change the constitutional language, which would allow a state bank, and that state bank being specifically set up for the infrastructure purposes that I had originally envisioned with municipal banks. So that whole movement may be morphing here in the state. Leslie and I do agree on the fact that it would be far superior to have it as a state bank than even a group of cities. So we'll have to follow that next year when it comes back up.
Any more thoughts?
I know everything said it. Leslie, real fast, both Bonnie and I just deeply appreciate how much time and effort you spent with us as you were trying to figure it out too. So it was actually a really lovely experience to go through. And I really appreciated how much conversation there was and just how much time and effort you were willing to put in for something that you weren't paid to do. Very, very, very. It was incredible.
The advantages of retired volunteers, right? Okay, so moving on. Next is a discussion of the financial policies by Bonnie.
Hi, so this is just a quick update on the financial policies as we're moving into the budget. So the financial policies in this section was regarding the meetings and the dates and ensuring that the meetings would be held at a very specific time frame each quarter. But as we have seen in the last couple of years, our meetings, we've been shifting them, to make arrangements for, holidays or other things that have come up. And then obviously the budget hearing meetings are definitely one of those areas where, there's a lot more meetings. So previously, when we had set this in the financial policies, it was under a different member the budget committee had recommended it. I am hoping this evening that we can change it to be a little bit more flexible for us to actually set the meeting calendar schedule on the first quarterly meeting of the fiscal year, which would be the November meeting. And then also, if something comes up and we can adjust the meetings as we go. And I think we've all been pretty good about the communication of that. There's nothing to vote on tonight. I was hoping to just discuss this change, and then when we go into the budget hearing in April and May, that's when we would actually vote on the financial policy.
I think that makes sense to me. I don't have any problem with just putting the change into the policy when it gets adopted as part of the budget.
Okay. Great.
Okay, so moving on, we're now going to address the quarterly financial report presented by Bonnie and Keith.
So actually I wanted to do a time check. I know we're well past our normal time frame, and just see if there was any questions, or I can definitely go ahead and do a full presentation. But third quarter, there's not a whole lot to report on, but we're going to definitely have a lot to discuss at the April meeting when we bring you the third quarter financial report. Go ahead, Ann.
This is not a question, but it is, again, another thank you to you and to Leslie. That report, it was funny. I started to read it and I sent Bonnie a message after about 5 minutes where I was just so excited. It was so clear to me exactly where we were, where our finances were, what issues there were with property taxes, everything just read so well. And I know it's taken us a long time to get there, but it was such an utterly clear report to the community about what's going on with our finances that I just wanted to call out. Leslie put a lot of time into helping us get to this point. Bonnie has put a lot of time into this. I know the rest of our finance staff have, but by the end of the report, I felt like I learned things in our quarterly report because it was so clear. I thought it was really exceptional. So I wanted to call that out.
And I'll add that our auditors, Marina and Associates, love reading our financial reports in general because they are so well written and accessible. And that is really very much to the credit of the work that staff does and incorporating input from smart people like Leslie who take the time to say, I think we could improve this. So thank you for valuing that our financial statements should be transparent as we can make them. I think it's important and it's easy to overlook.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And thank you also to Leslie too, because she does have a lot of great information and input. So definitely appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm a compulsive editor. It's in my blood. Okay, so I personally don't have any questions on the quarterly report and am more than willing to accept Bonnie's suggestion to basically, if there's no discussion, move on. Anybody have issues? Anybody want to address anything in particular? Nope. Well, then,
I move we
hear a motion to a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn the meeting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No, anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leslie.
Great meeting, Leslie.
You're welcome, John.